Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into something pretty significant, the Waqf Amendment Act 2025.
Absolutely. It's been through Parliament, got the president's assent on April 5th this year.
And now it's already facing challenges in the Supreme Court about its constitutionality. So, a lot happening.
Definitely.
Okay, maybe let's start right at the beginning. For anyone who isn't completely familiar, what exactly is a Waqf?
Right. So in Islamic law, a waqf is basically an endowment. A Muslim dedicates a property, could be land, could be a building for a religious or charitable purpose.
An endowment. Okay.
And the key thing is, once it's declared a waqf by the founder, the waqif, it's considered permanent, inalienable.
Meaning it can't be sold or inherited?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Can't be sold, gifted, inherited, mortgaged. It's seen as held in trust for God forever. Think of it like a perpetual charity, sadqa jariyah, as it's known. Yeah, and Islamic tradition really emphasizes this idea. There are said to be 3 deeds that continue to benefit someone after death.
And charity is one of them.
Continuing charity is listed first, actually. So waqf fits right into that core principle.
Okay, so this clearly has deep roots and major implications for property, for communities.
Huge implications.
So our mission today for this deep dive is really to unpack this 2025 Act, especially thinking about it from, say, a UPSC exam perspective, governance, law, societal impact.
Right, cutting through the noise, what changed, why, and what does it mean?
Exactly. We need to look at the key changes, the problems it's supposedly trying to fix, and the wider ripples. But maybe, just briefly, put this new act in context. It didn't just appear out of nowhere, right?
Oh, definitely not. Waqf has a very long history in India. We're talking back to the Delhi Sultanate.
Wow.
And attempts to regulate it legally go back centuries, too. British-era acts in 1863, 1890, then specific Waqf laws in 1913, informing the Sharia Act later.
And post-independence.
We got the Waqf Act of 1954, a major piece of legislation under Nehru. That was then replaced by the 1995 Act, which itself saw significant amendments in 2013.
So 2025 is just the latest step in this long evolution.
Precisely. Each step trying to grapple with the challenges of managing these, often very valuable and historically significant properties.
Right. Which brings us neatly to the problems. What were the key issues that this 2025 amendment is trying to address? You mentioned challenges.
Well, a big one, consistently flagged, has been transparency. Or rather, the lack of it in how Waqf properties are managed.
Accountability issues.
Yes. Lack of transparency, incomplete land records, making it hard to even know what is Waqf property sometimes. Questions around inheritance rights, especially for women.
And I remember reading about a big jump in court cases.
A huge jump. The number of litigations more than doubled between 2013 and the run-up to this act. Went from about 10,000 to over 21,000 cases.
Wow. What was driving that litigation spike?
A lot of factors, but a major point of friction was how Waqf boards could declare properties as Waqf, sometimes based just on their own inquiry.
Without necessarily involving, say, the current owner.
That was the perception, and often the reality leading to disputes. This perceived sort of unchecked power led to conflicts, especially over government land claims. Add to that poor accounting, administrative inefficiencies, sometimes questionable treatment of trust properties, maybe not enough representation for all stakeholders. It was a mix of issues.
You mentioned conflicts over declaring properties Waqf. I think one of the most talked about issues was when non-Muslim properties got tangled up in this.
Yes, that became a real flashpoint. The old framework allowed boards to investigate and potentially declare properties belonging to non-Muslims as Waqf.
And that led to pushback.
Understandably, yes. It led to a feeling of, unfairness and lots of legal battles. We saw quite a few examples hitting the headlines.
Can you give us a sense of the scale, maybe some specific instances?
Sure. There was a case in Tamil Nadu, the Durkantharai village, where a farmer apparently couldn't sell his land because the whole village was claimed.
The whole village?
That was the claim reported. Then in Bihar, Govindpur village, a claim affected several families, went to the Patna High Court. That was still sub judice, I think, as of mid-2024.
Okay.
Kerala saw a big case in Ernakulam, around 600 Christian families contesting a claim on what they said was ancestral land. They even appealed to the Joint Parliamentary Committee looking into the bill.
So significant community impact.
Absolutely. And in Karnataka, various districts like Vijayapura, Ballari, farmers protested when something like 15,000 acres were designated Waqf land. The government had to step in and assure them they wouldn't be evicted.
15,000 acres. That's a huge area.
It is. And UP also had its share of complaints about mismanagement, alleged corruption related to Waqf properties.
So these weren't just isolated incidents then?
It seems not. The Joint Committee itself received reports about alleged unlawful claims. Mention was made of 40 properties in Karnataka alone, farmland, public spaces, government land, even lakes and temples, with claims dating back decades, but also as recent as 2020.
Temples and lakes, too.
That's what was reported in the communications to the committee. And the Punjab Waqf Board supposedly claimed land belonging to the state's education department in Patiala.
It really highlights the potential for conflict when the lines are blurred.
Exactly. And just to add some official numbers, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs told the JPC in September 2024 that hundreds of government properties in Delhi under LNDO, DDA, public domain were stuck in litigation because of Waqf claims.
Right, over 350 properties just in Delhi. That underscores the need for clarity, definitely.
It does.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Another stated aim of the amendment is improving the rights of Muslim women and legal heirs. How does the act approach this?
Yes, that's a key focus. The idea is to boost their economic and social standing, particularly thinking about widows and divorced women.
Oh, so?
By promoting things like self-help groups, financial independence initiatives, it's also about ensuring their inheritance rights aren't overlooked when a property becomes Waqf.
So, safeguarding their share, essentially.
Yes. And beyond that, the Act envisions specific benefits flowing from better management and potentially women's increased involvement.
Like what kind of benefits?
Things like transparency through digitization helping everyone, but also specific initiatives establishing legal aid centers for family or inheritance disputes.
That could be crucial.
Absolutely. And directing resources towards girls' scholarships, healthcare, especially maternity welfare, skill development programs, microfinance, maybe even pension schemes for widows. The hope is that involving women more directly leads to resources addressing their specific needs.
That connects to another core idea of WAF, right? Supporting the poor and underprivileged. How does the amendment aim to strengthen that original purpose?
Well, historically, that's been a central role of WOC serving community welfare needs. But like we discussed, mismanagement, lack of transparency, legal occupations, all that can really dilute the impact.
So the money doesn't always get where it's supposed to go.
Or the properties aren't generating the income they could. So the amendment tries to tackle this primarily through better governance.
What are the main tools for that? Digitization seems key.
Digitization is huge. A centralized portal to track properties, manage them better, monitor income and spending. That transparency is meant to allow for better auditing and ensure funds are actually used for welfare.
And potentially increase revenue.
That's the hope. By stopping misuse, preventing illegal occupation, maybe recovering encroached lands through the Limitation Act changes we'll discuss, that should mean more money available.
Which can then be channeled into education, health.
Exactly. Healthcare, education, housing support, livelihood programs. Plus, regular published audits are supposed to boost public confidence that the money is being used properly.
Okay, so better governance is a recurring theme. Are there other specific administrative changes?
Yes, the Act aims for improved governance generally. More transparency, as we said, but also better coordination between WAC boards and local authorities, municipalities, district administration, etc., and protecting stakeholder rights more broadly.
And what about representation? I think there were changes there too, aiming for more inclusion.
Right. Empowering backward classes and other, perhaps less represented sects within the Muslim community is another stated goal.
How did the Act do that?
It mandates inclusion. For state WAC boards, for instance, it requires at least one member each from the Bora and Aga Khani communities if they have active WAC properties, Waqf, in that state.
Okay, specific community representation.
Yes, and also representation for Muslims from backward classes, explicitly mentioned separately from Shia and Sunni members. Plus, ensuring 2 or more elected members come from local bodies, like municipalities or panchayats.
Bringing in grassroots representation.
Exactly. And significantly, both the Central Waqf Council and the state boards must now include 2 non-Muslim members, not counting any ex officio government members.
2 non-Muslim members on the boards. That's interesting.
It is. It reflects an effort to broaden the perspectives involved in overseeing WAC administration, acknowledging its impact extends into the wider society.
Okay, we've covered the why, the issues the Act tries to fix. Let's get into the what. What are the actual key provisions and changes in the WAF Amendment Act 2025?
All right. A big one is the change to the WAC by user doctrine.
How does that change?
It's basically removed for the future. You can't just claim a property as WAC simply because it's been used communally for a long time anymore going forward.
So no new WACs created just by long use.
Correct. However, Properties that were already registered as WAC by user before this act generally keep that status. The exception is if there's an ongoing dispute about it or if it's government property.
That aims for more certainty, I suppose, less ambiguity.
That seems to be the intention, yes. Reducing future disputes based on undocumented historical usage.
And the inclusion of non-Muslims we mentioned, how is that formalized?
The Act mandates it. Minimum 2 non-Muslim members on the Central Waqf Council and minimum 2 on each state Waqf board.
And the CEO role.
That requirement is gone too. The chief executive officer of a Waqf board no longer needs to be a Muslim. It opens that administrative leadership role up.
Okay. What about the Waqf tribunals, the bodies that hear disputes?
They've been restructured. It's now a 3-member body.
Instead of 2.
Yes. It will have a district judge as the chairperson, a senior government officer joint secretary level as 1 member, and an expert in Muslim law and jurisprudence as the 3rd member.
So a mix of judicial, administrative, and legal expertise.
That's the idea. And importantly, tribunal decisions are no longer final.
Ah, so appeals are possible now.
Yes, you can appeal a tribunal order directly to the High Court within 90 days. That adds another layer of judicial review. Existing tribunals finish their current terms, though.
Got it. And you mentioned the government's role in surveys earlier, especially involving disputed or government land.
Right. The Act gives the collector, or a higher-ranked officer, the authority to conduct surveys for disputed properties, especially if government ownership is potentially involved.
And their decision is final.
In determining ownership in those specific cases involving potential government property, yes, that government officer's finding is the final authority according to the Act.
And a property can't even be listed as WAC until they finish.
Correct. Not until that officer submits their final report confirming it's not government property. If they find it is government property, the revenue records get updated. This is a major shift, putting clear authority with the state revenue machinery in those specific dispute scenarios.
Another huge legal shift seems to be applying the Limitation Act, 1963.
Yes, this is really significant for property law aspects. Section 107 of the old 1995 Act is repealed.
And Section 107 was the part that exempted WAC properties from time limits for legal claims.
Essentially, yes. It made it very difficult to claim adverse possession against Waqf paternity, for instance. Now, the Standard Limitation Act applies.
Meaning the usual time limits, 12 years for private land, 30 years for government land for making claims, including adverse possession, now apply to Waqf properties too.
Exactly. This aligns Waqf property disputes with general property law regarding timelines for legal action. It could potentially unlock resolutions for very old disputes, but also places a time frame on making claims.
The Act also touches on inheritance and tribal lands specifically.
It does. It makes it explicit that women's and children's inheritance rights must be secured before property is dedicated as WAF.
So you can't use WAF to bypass legal inheritance.
That's the stated aim. And regarding tribal lands, it explicitly prohibits creating any new WAF on lands that fall under the 5th and 6th schedules of the Constitution.
Protecting those constitutionally safeguarded tribal areas.
Yes, a specific protection for tribal rights in those scheduled areas.
Okay, what about actually creating a WAF now and registering it?
There are stricter conditions. Only the lawful owner who is legally competent to transfer property can create a WAF.
Makes sense.
And if it's a waq awlad one, for the benefit of descendants, it must not deny the rightful inheritance shares of all legal heirs, including women. Also, crucially, no new waq can be created without a written waq deed from the day the act commences.
So informal dedications are out for the future. Needs documentation.
Precisely. And for existing waqs registered before this act, they have to get their details onto that new centralized digital portal.
The one we mentioned for transparency.
Yes. Within 6 months, though, the tribunal can grant another 6 months if needed. They need to provide a lot of detail. Property info, who created it, who manages it, the mutawali, income, expenses, any litigation.
A comprehensive database.
That's the goal. The Act also explicitly forbids wrongly declaring government property as waq and says any declaration of a protected monument as waq is void. Registration can be refused if the property is disputed or government-owned unless a court settles it first.
And if an existing WAC doesn't register on the portal?
After that 6-month, plus potential extension, window closes, an unregistered WAF generally cannot file any legal proceedings. Though courts might have some discretion if there's a really good reason for the delay. It pushes strongly towards registration and digitization.
What happens to property surveys that were already in progress under the old system?
They get transferred. If a survey commissioner was doing it, The responsibility now shifts to the collector of the district. They'll pick it up from where it's left off, but using the state's revenue laws for the survey process.
So integrating it more with the standard land administration system.
Seems to be the direction, yes.
The composition of the Central Waqf Council and state boards. You mentioned non-Muslim members, but what's the overall structure now?
Okay, the Central Waqf Council is quite broad, chaired by the Union Minister for Waqf. It includes MPs, reps from national Muslim organizations, state board chairs rotating, a high-income Mutawali rep, Muslim law scholars, retired judges, an eminent advocate, national figures in fields like admin, finance, engineering, medicine, plus a government joint secretary.
A very diverse council.
Yes, and within that, the mandate for at least 2 women and 2 non-Muslims among the appointed nominated members, excluding ex officio.
And the state boards. Similar idea.
Similar principle, scale down. Up to 11 members nominated by the state government, chairperson, MP, MLA from the state, a high-income Mutawali, an Islamic scholar, local body reps, municipalities, panchayats, professionals, business, social work, finance, etc., a state joint secretary, and a bar council member.
And the inclusion rules?
Same thing. Minimum 2 women appointed, minimum 2 non-Muslims overall, excluding ex officio. Plus, the representation we discussed for Shia, Sunni, other backward classes, and potentially Bora and Aga Khani communities.
Okay. The Act also defines who can't be a Mutawali, right? The manager of a Waqf property.
Yes, it lists specific disqualifications. Being under 21, of unsound mind, insolvent, convicted of a serious offense over 2 years jail, guilty of encroaching on Waqf land or having been removed previously from a Mutawali or trust position for corruption or mismanagement, clear grounds for removal or non-appointment.
Right. Lastly, what about the money side? Audits, contributions, penalties.
Key changes there, too. Waqfs earning over 1 lakh rupees annually must now have an annual audit by state-impaneled auditors.
Mandatory audit above that threshold?
Yes, and the central government can order an audit anytime regardless of income. Audit reports have to be published transparency again. The contribution a Waqf pays to the board, which used to be 7%, is now capped at a maximum percentage to be set by the central government. Could be less than 7%.
So potentially less burden on the Waqfs themselves.
Potentially, yes. And penalties for violations are up. Higher fines for not keeping accounts or submitting reports, and potential imprisonment and fines for Mutawalis who fail to hand over property, follow directions, provide accounts, or importantly, fail to upload the Waqf details to that digital portal.
Real teeth for enforcement, then.
That seems to be the intent. Oh, and one more thing, legal updates. References to old laws like the Indian Evidence Act are replaced with the new Bharatiya Sakshya Adhiniyam 2023. Land Acquisition Act references updated too, and as we covered, the Limitation Act 1963 now applies. It's a thorough legal refresh.
Definitely sounds comprehensive. Okay, pulling this all together,
Right.
what's the big picture takeaway? Especially thinking about governance, public policy, the UPSC angle.
Look, the fundamental aim seems to be creating a Waqf administration system that's, well, more secular in its operational aspects, definitely more transparent, more accountable, and fits more clearly within the general legal framework of the country.
Emphasizing the regulatory role of the boards, not religious.
Exactly. Their job is regulation, management, ensuring compliance, protecting public interests, preventing misuse, not directing religious practice itself. The hoped-for benefits are streamlined management, better protection of rights, including for women and tribal communities, much greater transparency, and ultimately making sure these valuable Waqf resources actually serve their intended welfare purposes more effectively.
But it hasn't been without debate, has it?
No, not at all. As we noted, it's in the Supreme Court. There are ongoing discussions. Some groups raise concerns about minority rights potentially being impacted or about too much government control. Others see it as long overdue reform, necessary to stop misuse and ensure these resources benefit the community properly. How it actually plays out on the ground, the implementation, will be key.
Which leads perfectly to our final thought for you, the listener. Considering this long history of Waqf in India, the problems identified, and the sweeping changes in this 2025 Act, what do you think will be its most significant impact in the real world? And looking ahead, what else might need to be considered for this act to be implemented effectively and lead to genuinely equitable outcomes for everyone involved?
It's definitely a complex picture. The history is deep, the changes are significant, and the impact, well, that remains to be seen in practice.
Indeed. A space to watch closely. Thank you for walking us through that complexity.
My pleasure. Always interesting to delve into these legislative shifts.
And thank you for joining us for this deep dive. If you want to explore the Waqf Amendment Act 2025 further, do check out the official Gazette notification and parliamentary debates for the full details. We hope this gave you a solid overview. As for our next deep dives, you'll have to tune in to find out. Until then, keep diving deeper.